Hi, everyone. My name is Winifred Lewis, and I'm the director of the Social Change Lab. We're running the Australian Festival of Democracy and Human Rights. And this event is by Tight Knit, and I'm excited to turn the camera over in a moment to Jody and Tully. And I just want to begin by paying my respects to the traditional custodians of the lands we're on today, and acknowledge elders past and present, including extending that respect to people of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander heritage on the call. Over to you, Jody and Tully.
Are we on the thing? Hello, we should probably.
There we go. I'm too tiny for it.
Hello, team.
Hello, beautiful people. My name's Tully.
I'm Jody.
We're from Tight Knit.
And we're going to be presenting today about using digital communications to build tight-knit communities, the antidote to fascism. That's our pitch.
We're absolutely thrilled to be here. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
It'll be good. Alrighty, so we'll kick off by acknowledging that we're presenting on stolen Yagara and Turrbal land. Sovereignty was never ceded, and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I guess on that, it's Reconciliation Week, which, I think is sort of evidently not a goal that is being progressed. And I would say that we are becoming further irreconciled. I think, and we can see that pretty tangibly with Barrambin and the demolishing and really forceful sort of police violence against First Nations people at the hands of the state and the city with federal backing. So, yeah, that is the context in which we are doing our stuff. And I think that's reflected in the work that we do. Hang on. Can you hit the... Yeah. Hey. Hello.
It's us. My name's Tully. Who am I? I'm 18. I'm in my first year of uni. Very exciting. And yeah, I help with Tight Knit. I do Tully's takes on that. And then Jody.
Hello. Yes, I'm Jody. I do campaigning on trans issues, but I also do stuff for Tight Knit. I go to council meetings and I try whoa, something went ding dong. Something that I enjoy doing is trying to dig in with I guess some of the more analysis and I guess longer term stuff, and that goes a bit broader than council. That's sort of what I do with Tight Knit, and it's a fun thing that I'm very glad to be a part of.
Yeah, we're so proud to be a part of Tight Knit. I think it's such a beautiful, we love this city. I love this city more than words can describe. And I think Tight Knit is our way of kind of manifesting all that love and into something a bit tangible. We only want good things for this city. And I think we can do that through, peace and love in community that we're trying to build. And we're here to tell you a bit more about that, I suppose.
By posting.
Yeah.
So what are we doing? Look, Tight Knit is a community development and independent media collective based in Magingen. We focus on arts and politics and culture, and a big focus of, or the lens through which we approach those ideas is that we make connections between the personal and the political, rather than seeing this thing as politics as being something that's done to you, right? Or that it's this separate, even the notion of politics, right? That it's this thing that's like cloistered away in 100-year-old building, is sort of, we want to try and break that open, basically, and get people stuck right in.
And yeah, council is such this kind of magical space where it's not state, it's not federal, so it doesn't feel, it's so personal. And council is almost, in my opinion, one of the most democratic, or the most democratic level of government. You know, you've got in a usual town or city, you have basically just independent people trying to do their best for their little slice of the town. In Brisbane, that's very different, and that's something tight-knit is basically formed around, is this idea that Brisbane has the strangest kind of council makeup in, and I'm a politics nerd, so that's why I'm like but that's why I really love this kind of, we're so unique in that way, and does it do more harm than good? Yes, because people are very much vying for their party and so their slice of land. And I think council, everybody thinks it's this really annoying thing, and it is, but that's the beauty of it, it affects your drive to work, it affects when your bins are picked up, it affects all these things that we don't think of as political because they're just mundane things, and yet they're attached to these insane kind of like connections to corruption and all this kind of stuff that affects your everyday life so much. And I think, council is where people get to or should get to have their say the most. And right now in Brisbane, it's less that way than it probably should be. And like our sister cities and the regions and stuff. So, yeah.
We have a lot of sister cities, like
we have
Los
11
Angeles.
sister cities.
We have Los Angeles as our most recent, the new baby.
One in Japan, one in Taiwan, one in.
Otherwise, I know there's a big one about the Japan.
Yeah.
In South Bank.
Yeah, and there's one in like maybe New Orleans.
I don't know what a sister city does. I think it's just vibes.
Big fan.
Do you want to hit the? Yeah. So we make videos. I'm going to come around here because I've got to click the button. So what do we actually do? What are we? We make videos about council meetings, and that's basically we go in and we watch question time, and then Tully comes in and watches the debate afterwards, and then we make videos talking about it. Council meetings look a lot like, I don't know if you've ever seen question time or just parliamentary debate at a state or federal level. At least in Brisbane City Council, that is a lot of what council meetings look like. And so we stick in there. We also investigate local history and local happenings. And so this can be current things, like we are currently making a video about Barrambin. And as you can see here, this is another one of our wonderful tight-knit.
Back.
Hello.
Go on.
Hi, yeah, that's Ella. We're talking about queer history in Brisbane. And I think some people know us from one time we got a bunch of people to go into council dressed as clowns because our council are a bunch of clowns.
And it was also kind of to demonstrate, I suppose, the kind of absurdity that is politicians occasionally. You've got a lot of good people in council, and I think that is something that tends to be glossed over. There's a lot of people that are fighting for what council actually intended, and I think it gets so overlooked because there's so many people, and it is such a large majority of the LNP that it is such a people are just like, oh, the LNP is the best, Labor is the best, and it's like, well, that doesn't really matter when it comes to this park that is falling to pieces, that doesn't have a political affiliation. And I think as dressing as clowns, it was such a beautiful kind of metaphor to allow us to point out the fact that they're working overtime, basically producing this political circus, when in actual fact, they don't have to do that at all. What they can be doing is what they should be doing, which is advocating for the people they represent in the places that they should love. And I think, we sat up there very well behaved, and it turned out we were so much better behaved than them because they were yelling the entire time at each other, and there's lots of personal insults, and it's very unnecessary. So we're proud of our clown movement.
Yeah, I think I tend to be a bit more cynical, and I think that the sort of the production that you see in council meetings is a reasonably accurate reflection of, in general, the the way that governance and sort of how power is wielded, how power is exercised, and the way that governance is done. I think it's it's a fair reflection of that, and and I think that that the clown thing, it felt really appropriate. And I'll show you later on, but there's the thing that we put on the poster for the clown event was "You'll fit right in," because I think we could all in general agree that it's not what it should be, and I think at a certain point absurdity is one of the more reasonable responses to the conditions that we see. Yeah. Hello. So let's get into it. The threat that we saw and are trying to respond to is essentially fascism, which I think I would describe it as basically a figure, whoever you might want to insert into this to being this figure, would say that society was once great, but it was spoiled by a certain minority group. We need a strong man to make us great again by smashing the minority. And you can describe it as having being very nationalistic, being very militaristic, being very authoritarian. But in general, that's sort of the threat, I guess, that we see, and we don't want that to launch a lot.
And Queensland's such this beautiful kind of encapsulation of the Australian threat, which is Queensland is set up so uniquely in its politics, where basically the only state that does it the way we do, we basically do it like a territory. So Northern Territory is very similar. And that means, and a lot of this is on purpose, the state is disconnected. It's intended to be. Us city people don't recognize the struggle of the regions, which makes the people in the regions rightfully mad. And then we're kind of all warring against each other. You've got no other state that is like Queensland. It's this beautiful, I love this state, clearly. And I think it's intended to be that way. You had the Joe government and a lot of that stuff, although there was the inquiries and there was lots of work, it was never undone. We're set up to be very vulnerable to kind of fascist and more like authoritarian kind of governments. And that seems really hyperbolic. But we see it playing out a lot. And I think Brisbane, which is in every way the center of this state, where the state is designed around Brisbane, it's not a good thing, but, is this kind of epicenter of beautiful people who happen to continuously get sold a threat that maybe isn't there.
And we see that in some really scary stuff. Like, was it yesterday or the day before? 100+ cops coming to smash the Aboriginal embassy in Barrambin, or a few weeks ago when they're dragging, that we see cops dragging, Jews and Indigenous people and trans people and critics of the government, dragging them off the street into vans for saying the naughty words about water and freedom. And so, I think that there is a gap between us and a fully operationalized authoritarian fascist state. But I think the bedrock is there, and I think we're starting to see some extremely disturbing things happening right here in Queensland.
And it is that isolation that really breeds this kind of stuff. We're very disconnected from where young people are being sent to prisons, which it's happening here, but it's out of sight, out of mind, and in a lot of that's what they're trying to do. This kind of idea that, well, they're gone now, the bad guys are gone, and nobody questions where the bad guys are gone and why the bad guys are bad guys. And that's because we can't see them. And I think that's that's how this state was kind of bred to operate, and it's working perfectly at the moment, as it was intended to do. And so you got to the antidote to all this is connection and community and loving thy neighbor.
Exactly. So, yeah, I think if by building a stronger community, I think that makes it more difficult to depersonalize and dehumanize other people, and to be able to see them. It makes it harder to see people as, things instead of people. It makes it more difficult to be able to be able to convince somebody that your neighbor is a threat. And by building these sort of communities, it makes it much easier to organize responses to whether it's environmental shocks or supply chain breakdowns, like, for example, in a cyclone, or if it's threats from the state, right? Having a strong community, I think, is a really good way to prevent that and to respond when and if it does happen. How are we doing it, though?
Well, Tight Knit's doing it through posting.
We're posting. We're getting on the internet and posting.
The government, especially, and this sounds so woo-woo conspiracy, but it's very true. The government, even at a local level like council, its biggest kind of threat of operations is people watching and people questioning and people saying, what? Because they want you to believe kind of the sanitized narrative that's released, which is how politics works. It's not some big conspiracy. It's just how they want you to believe that this is in your best interest, even when it's in developers' best interests or it's in lobbyists' best interests. And so by going in and watching this debate that you're technically allowed to watch because it's democracy, but they really don't want you watching, you can see what's actually being said and then report back on that. And I think, that's what Tight Knit's doing.
One of the pillars that supports some of the more horrendous stuff that our council does is a lack of scrutiny. It's that opacity, right? Opaqueness. It's that people is that they're operating with a lack of transparency, and I think that's one of the easiest pillars to knock out, because it just means looking at them. And I don't think it fully solves the problem, but I think it is certainly a pillar which holds up the structure that allows for some of the worst stuff to happen. It's that nobody knows what's going on.
And it's such a beautiful thing that I think I've recognized within Tight Knit. I keep saying that, but I think I love it. I love the work that I get to do. But they know we're watching. They know Tight Knit. And that's an incredible thing, that you start seeing things put forward that you say, that's interesting. We talked about that last week, and we talked about them not having that. And then they know that this audience is watching and scrutinizing them like they've never been watched before. And suddenly they want to appear favorable. And I think that's such an insane thing. Labour especially does it. You notice, leader of the opposition puts forward something and you say, that's what I said I wanted last week.
And you also see it, and I think we can dig into this, and we will return to this in a bit, but certainly the rhetoric being used, I have noticed a shift in the rhetoric being used by the council, the LNP administration, which is not necessarily in terms of the actions, but I think it's interesting that they, in my view, have shifted rhetoric. We can come back to this, but I think we're definitely, they definitely know we exist.
Yeah, they know we're watching, and I think governments and politics always know when people are watching, and they want votes. It's not like a thing that they want to say whatever they want to say if people are watching. They only do it when people aren't. And so, I think that's incredible. And I like seeing politicians' minds in action, because I think they're very unique creatures and their way of thinking is so different to a normal person that you're like, you don't believe that. You're just saying that because you saw me in the gallery. And I think eventually they'll start saying it so much that they might believe it, and then they might do it.
Yeah. So why are we doing this? We want to empower empower ordinary people and make them feel like they have a stake in their community, and that sort of shifts the perspective of politics as away from something that's being done to you to something which you do, right? Like even this notion of a politician, right, being an elected official, I think is kind of antithetical in my view to what democracy is or should be. And I think that by making people feel like, and therefore making it so that they are active participants in politics, I think we're shifting, and as I mentioned before, I think we're shifting and removing a pillar of support from sort of unchecked, uninterrogated power that's used in some ways that I think are really destructive.
Yeah, and I think this word, I was fortunate enough for 2 years to be on the advisory board to Home Affairs for youth civic engagement. Not affiliated to this, don't come for me, please. But it's such a beautiful thing. They taught me there this kind of icebreaker that was to ask people, what's been the most democratic thing you've done this week? And it sounds so nerdy and so stupid, but it actually changed my life because this question, right? You think I haven't voted. I haven't been to Parliament out. That's what we think of as democracy. But I'm going to call Alice out here, who's one of the other tight-knit people. She found this lock on a toilet block that was owned and operated by council wasn't working. She kept calling. And she kept calling and calling and got her friends to call until it was fixed. And that's democracy. And this kind of question changed, in the nerdiest, most politic nerd way possible. And I know it's so cringe, but it does make me emotional because we're all participating in democracy every single day. And the people that don't want you participating in democracy don't want you knowing that you have so much power. And this power is beautiful. You can use it to the best of your advantage. And you are participating in democracy every single day, whether you like it or not, whether you're of voting age or not. Everybody is doing a civic duty every single day. And tight-knit is kind of this manifestation of all of us doing our democratic duty that we just happen to do. And people, by interacting and watching and stuff, start participating in that way as well.
Yeah. These are some of the things that we've done that I think highlight, I think that they highlight that sort of mission there. I mentioned before the clown protest. And if you can see on the screen in the middle of his shirt, it's "You'll fit right in." And I think first of all, it's very participatory, right? And I think it's empowering to, it's like making fun of the teacher in the classroom, right? When the teacher ought to be made fun of, basically. It's ridiculing this system which has a really significant and oftentimes negative impact on our lives. And I think it's in the vein of a long history of clown protests, which obviously have a sort of anti-politics slant, but I think can be really useful. I don't know if you remember, there was a protest a few weeks ago where people dressed up like John Farnham to protest against a law that the government has introduced because a line in the song is similar, but not quite the same as a phrase that is banned. And it's making ridicule of something that the purpose is to be sort of frightening and opaque and powerful, right? And it's taking away some of that power. And I think that's really important. And it's giving that power, it's building it away from this sort of centralized, suit-wearing, sort of cloistered group within a 100-year-old building and distributing it to the masses in a way that I think really rejects the legitimacy of that power, right? By getting people to dress up as clowns.
Yeah.
And that's obviously engaging directly with existing power structures. The other way is by building sort of an alternative structure and an alternative community and an alternative to what has already been prescribed, right? And did you come to the morning session of the collaging?
I was at a different event.
Oh, I went to the afternoon session of our collaging. But yeah, we got people to come to House Conspiracy in South Brisbane. And it's literally just what it says on the tin. We got them to cut out pictures from old magazines and encyclopedias and that, and made art in a way that is, like, again, not the purpose of it was not overtly political. The purpose of it was not to, it wasn't explicitly, this is a community building exercise, right? But it put people into like incidental contact with each other while doing collage. It engaged people in a creative process, which I think is like, again, in my view, I think that this kind of creativity and creation is antithetical to oppressive structures of top-down power, right?
And I mean, yeah, on that, the clown protest too. I read an article a little while ago, and it was this kind of idea that the left needs to have more fun. And I think that is a very kind of prevalent issue. I know it's really hard when you know all this horrendous stuff that's going on and people's lives are at stake and you're like, oh my goodness, like how could we make this fun? It's not fun when you know you've got people who depend on you with privilege to fight for them. And that's a lot of kind of pressure. And I'm coming from a very, I guess, young person's point of view. And also originally from regional Queensland too. This idea that like the left needs to have more fun is a ginormous issue because people see us as this very annoying kind of force that tends to just bring everybody down. And that's not what we are, but it is how we are perceived by a lot of spaces. And that's an issue. That is an issue. And it is something that needs to be addressed and worked on, even though it is really hard when you feel like having fun is a betrayal of people's lives and people's identities. But the clown protest kind of gave people such a beautiful gateway into like politics at a community level because you don't want to go. It's not like most people don't want to give up their Tuesday afternoons. You know, we know we're an outlier here, especially, you know, me. I was watching council on live streams in high school. It was this whole thing. But like, you kind of know that that's not a realistic expectation for most people to do because it can be boring. It can be a lot of old, middle-aged people kind of just arguing about possum boxes and you're like, what is the point? But having this kind of silly dress up that gives people this way into council that they're not really there for council, they're there to, you know, dress up. And that's how you open people's minds because then they go into council and they actually watch and they say, oh, this actually does affect me a lot. And they're dressed as clowns and, you know, maybe like 20% of the people there didn't even really care. But then they come out of it and they do care because they've been allowed to participate in a way that is easier to stomach. And it's easier to be like, oh, no, I'm not one of those. I'm just like, you know, I'm there to dress up and have fun. And I think, yeah, I think we need to use that more. And I think Tight Knit is an example of that, of people just being like, oh, I would have never got through this 3 hours of slop, basically, of jargon, of political kind of, I guess, innuendo of like, they're all saying something which they don't mean, and they're all yelling and insulting each other, and it's hard, and it's mean, and it's dry. But then when you kind of regurgitate it in a way that is fun, people care, and people start caring drastically more than they would have. So I do think online spaces and tight-knit have this power to really change the narrative around the left and how we operate as a group kind of thing. Yeah.
I'll hit it. So let's talk about an example of, let's say that we could get to where we want to be, right? So you might be aware of what happened, but basically in the US, obviously they have their current political situation, which is deteriorating, right? And that soldier-looking guy, if you look on his chest, that's actually a cop, right? And it's the immigrations and custom enforcement. It's this paramilitary, I would argue, and I think it's pretty evident, that's going around and abducting people who aren't white or who are immigrants or who are presumed to be immigrants, to send to temporary holding camps and then sort of deported elsewhere. Not necessarily with respect to actual, the paperwork that they might or might not have for immigration, or where they even came from in the first place, right? But basically, they're grabbing people off the street and getting rid of them. It's really scary stuff. But in Minnesota, where this picture's from, the community really was able to pull together and respond in a way which I think, it was bad, right? And I don't think it's reasonable to expect otherwise. But ultimately, the operation, was it Metro Surge, I think Trump called it, it ended. They drove them out. So what happened was this paramilitary force descends in huge numbers on Minnesota at the beginning of the year in January, and the numbers continue to climb for a bit. And what people are able to do is form these groups that you can see in this photo, where you can see each of those three figures in the front. You can make out that they're actually, if you look in the back as well, all of them, and oh wow, even more in the back, it's all of them there. You can see that they're all performing a role, right? So we have somebody who's blowing a whistle there to alert people to run away, or to come and confront them that there are these ICE agents about, and the rest are filming them to be able to send that information to other people and to publicize, basically. And they were able to coordinate this kind of response through signal groups, right? Which sort of neighborhood, even down to the neighborhood level, they talk to each other using signal. And then when somebody saw an ICE agent, they ran out and started getting footage of them and blowing the whistle to alert people, to give them more information about what's happening. And so people who are vulnerable can, hide, go away from that area. And people who are willing to confront them, swarm to the area. And that can look like, following them around, beeping their horns. It could look like this kind of standing in their road, preventing them from grabbing people and taking them away. And it also looked like these scenes that aren't as confrontational, right? It looks like people being able to go to the grocery shop for immigrant families to bring them food. It looks like running sort of mutual aid hubs to be able to make food for people who aren't going into work anymore because they're afraid of being abducted. And ultimately, two people got shot, right, by ICE. 2 people were killed, and a lot were taken. But ultimately, they retreated. The current, as it had been, the previous person who was in charge of ICE was moved away, and I think is no longer in that role. And the person who ran the Department of Homeland Security, which is sort of the overall one that oversees immigration, is also no longer in that role. There's been a withdrawal of this paramilitary ICE. And in effect, by organising very closely with each other, by having a tight-knit community, they were able to beat ICE. And I think if things got very bad here, this is the kind of response that we would need to be able to have.
And tight-knit's Brisbane is such an incredibly unique city, and people love this city. I know it gets, like, people make a lot of jokes about it, but the people that live in Brisbane usually love Brisbane. Otherwise, you'd go to Melbourne. Like, there's not this kind of, like, people love Brisbane, and Brisbane people love each other. And I think, loving each other is such a fundamental part of tight-knit communities. You don't have to like everybody. I think that's a very different kind of idea. Yes. You don't have to like everybody, but, passing people on the street and forming these communities that of routine and of knowing people is a very Brisbane thing to do. I like to use the example, I went to Sydney for 5 days once and I hated it. Nobody smiled on the streets and nobody said hello or good morning to me, and I would do it to them and they'd just ignore me, and I was like, this is awful, take me back. Brisbane has that. Brisbane people want to talk to each other and they want to know each other and they want to build routines with each other, even if that routine is built off a kind of dislike of another person. It's a very unique city in that way. There's this one guy who likes to comment, especially on my videos. He has this vendetta a little bit against us, but really he kind of likes watching. And he, I remember one time he said, don't you ever just want to give up because people keep voting for the LNP and they'll always vote for the LNP. No, I love this city. I love these people, even if they do vote for the LNP, because it's not, they don't know. They're voting because they're being fed this narrative. And a lot of people are down on their luck, or they have this dream that they want to build, and they are fed this idea that that's who's going to give it to them. Or they have no idea what council does and they vote for the same guy that's been in for 18 years, it's familiarity. I don't think as tight-knit people we have any sort of negative hatred towards, these ordinary people in our neighborhood who do just vote for them because that's who's been in for living memory, basically. It's this idea that if we can kind of get this narrative out, be like, hey, you have so much love in your heart, and we see that. You have compassion. You are not a bad person, and we're not saying you're a bad person. You love these people that are being affected by these laws and by these things that council are doing, because a lot of people don't know how much power council has. Maybe next time you might vote for the people you love. And a lot of times people do, because people are not inherently bad or evil ever. And I know I'm a really I have a very non-cynical view of that. But I think Brisbane especially, and to this guy who will always keep commenting, the LNP will always win. Okay, well, I love Brisbane, and I love the people in Brisbane, and I love my neighbours, and I love the people I meet with every day when I go to work, and I love the people that are on the street. And if they voted for the people, I am willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that they just got tricked, because it's so easy. And I think tight-knit's a really good example of how we can begin changing people's minds in a really non-kind of aggressive and judgmental way, which I think is another problem with the left, but
I think a good example of this, there were, alongside this sort of direct response to ICE in popping up ICE officers individually and interrupting them, there were obviously massive protests, right? And at these protests, one thing that I remember is it was footage of this person holding up a sign that said, "What would Ronald Reagan do?" And you can like obviously I think he'd probably be pleased with what's happening.
Anti-Ronald Reagan.
But the people who, regardless of having a like a philosophy and a worldview that's pretty different from what you might expect to be at a protest against sort of state violence against immigrants, they were there for their community anyway. And I think what you said was really good, this idea that you need not like your neighbor, but you do have to love them in order to be able to resist some really bad stuff happening and to get through it all, because the only way through is together.
Yeah, I found in my time in this kind of role, well, just in my time in politics, I guess, there are very few people that when pressed and exposed and repeatedly kind of questioned will return to this idea of hatred and of kind of, and there are people, especially the politicians, but I'm talking far more about those you are likely to meet in our community. When talked to with compassion and understanding, and this idea that you haven't out the bat written them off for how they vote, they often return to love because they aren't bad people. Very few people, I fear, are bad people. Even though it's really easy in this kind of world and in this gig and in the land of politics to be like, they're all evil and they're out to get us. People love each other. People have people that are directly opposite to their political views that they would do anything for. And it is this weird juxtaposition where they're scared, and so they're going to go for the people that sell them comfort. And we need to make sure that we're creating comfort that is built on love and not fear and hatred. And I think Tight Knit really has radical potential to do that.
So, look, how are we going to measure this ultimately? And I think outcomes are the real test of efficacy, right? So I think you can throw a lot at them, and I know that wins are going to be rare, but I think what I'm certainly looking for is, are we making real change, right? Do existing institutions reflect our perspective? Is council, like for example, a good test would be, is council being directly led through a process of active consultation and community feedback? And then the other side of this is, are people connected to each other in ways that can resist shocks, whether that's a cyclone, whether that's, let's say there is a real crunch around oil because of, war or whatever, and the shelves are, supplies on the shop shelves are really dwindling, or if there's an invasion by a paramilitary targeting a segment of society.
Or a tragedy, terrorist attacks, and that sort is often a very good test of community.
Are people connected to each other in ways that can resist shocks? And I think some of it is there for the people, but I think we have a way to go in both of them. I said that we'd return about to this thing of council shifting some of their rhetoric, right? And so I think you can see that reflected in certainly what some of the Labor councillors are doing. It's for some reason they seem to be taking cues pretty directly from us. Like very weirdly,
it is incredible.
Some of what Labor is doing is clearly downstream of the things that we have done and said, right?
Some of the things they're introducing is exactly what we said, the last video, which is incredible.
I'm pleased with that. I'm really happy that they're doing that. I think, and again, similarly with the Liberals, I think some of the rhetoric that they're using,
they're shifting.
They are shifting in the rhetoric that they are using in council meetings so that they have the appearance of and they can perform a changed values or a different process. I think that's obviously not true.
No, and you know, I mean, Labor especially, they've lost 23 years of being in opposition. I'm sorry to any Labor people watching. That's embarrassing for any kind of party that is. So I think they know they need to change for 2028. And they know the only way to do this is by getting this audience on board. And I think same with the Libs, actually. They're very yesterday in council meeting, I noticed something very interesting. One of the councillors was talking about scouts. They're always talking about the scouts. It's this repetitive thing. And he went outdoorsmanship and then he goes, outdoors personship. And it's they are they're playing the long game, I think. And I think that's such an incredible example of how community can manipulate, I guess, the interests of these politicians, even if they aren't genuine. And they oftentimes aren't. They're still trying in terms of to get our votes, which is power.
Yeah, and I think that it's going to take a lot more to. So, for example, I don't think that Labor is doing anything which is like a really big swing.
No.
You know, I don't think they're saying that there needs to be, we're creating that they're not bringing. For example, they aren't bringing motions for making a new public housing development.
Yeah,
right?
They play it very safe still.
They, I think, truly have nothing to lose. They have not increased their numbers since, was it in 23 years, is it?
Yeah, 23 years.
Yeah, they have not increased their number of seats in 23 years. I think they truly have nothing to lose, but they're not doing anything that I would consider brave or important. And similarly with the Liberals, while they are shifting rhetoric, I think they are manifestly not shifting their actions. And I think it's going to take a lot more. I think they need to feel like more pillars of support have been removed. So
they still feel very safe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard not to feel safe when you've been in power since before I was born. That's a long time.
They've lost their opaqueness, right? They're exposed to scrutiny, which means that they will shift appearances.
They're getting a little scared. You know they are because they hate us.
But things need to change substantially more. And I really would love to be able to build and grow tight-knit into something that is able to achieve those two outcomes. That existing institutions are shifting because of our actions to reflect what we want, and people outside of them have built up these structures sort of in parallel to existing institutions that are able to provide both community and meaning and connection, but also that sort of material support and protection when either the state fails or the state and the council is turned against people. I think that's overall what we're doing. Oh, I guess one thing that we didn't touch on as much is why posting?
Oh, yeah.
Why posting? It's because it's the current medium. If this was 10 years ago, we would probably be running a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Which we are
10 years
also.
before that, a community TV channel.
We would probably be doing a small scale newspaper.
Yeah.
I think it's not much more deep than that is the current medium.
It's very accessible. We have people it's so hard to get into City Hall when you're
Right.
it is an exhausting kind of effort to make. So to be able to watch it from the outskirts of Brisbane or Moreton Bay, places that are still very much affected, but it is just such a slog to get into City. So much easier to just watch it weekly online. And also it's democratic. I mean, it's this real.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're also not mastering the medium, I would argue.
It's not scary.
We would be
very approachable.
We would be pumping out like we would have multiple accounts pumping out like AI slopaganda, right? If we wanted to sort of master the medium, we're just using what's the broadest, the one with the broadest reach, and the one that I think reaches the people who we want to. That's kind of the full story of why we're using why we're doing it by posting.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's kind of the story of Tight Knit. I think we might have time for like 2 questions.
Yeah. If people want
Yeah, does anybody want to ask something?
Maybe the people on.
Yeah, someone
Yeah.
online. Christine? Oh, you're also on the internet. Okay, cool. If not, we can leave it.
Well,
Yeah.
just to say, one of the things I love about your videos is that in addition to going to City Hall and commenting, which is amazing, and you also will invite other people to come, and then you'll ask them what they thought of it and the phrases and the voices of ordinary people, including unhoused people, visitors, international students. Sometimes they're represented, and I love that about what you do. Can you talk a little bit about your philosophy of inclusiveness there?
Yeah, I mean, Tight Council is open to everybody. It is actually, and it makes me so giddy and excited because you just go in, and it is annoying because you have to put everything in a locker and you can't bring water in because you might throw it at them. But you go in and everybody's allowed in. Everybody's allowed to sit quietly and watch in the aircon, away from technology for however long you want. I'm usually there for 3.5 hours or so.
To be clear, they make you show photo ID, right?
Oh,
Which
yeah,
I think
you do have ID.
and you go through more security than going into state parliament.
Yes, but the security guards, you make friends with them, and they're not.
Yeah,
they've got a little wand, So it is so accessible, and it is fun to watch. They're yelling at each other. They're being mean in like ways that you didn't even know they could be mean. It is incredible to watch, and I think that it is probably the most accessible form of government because it's right there in the city. You can go anytime. It's not just question time. It's the entire 7 hours that you can go. And it's a place to, sit around and watch something entertaining for a while.
I think it's also you're right that that there is a diversity of people who we get on the show, and I think at least to my mind, it's not especially consciously done.
No.
That's sort of the people who we know and who want to be in videos.
And who are affected by things. And it's such council affects everybody in Brisbane.
And so I think, to an extent, there is a commitment to, a politics of anti-racism and talking to people who are affected by the things that are happening, right? But I think there hasn't been a specific strategy of getting a diverse group of guests or whatever. That's just sort of been what's happened because of who we know and have access to. Yeah,
people think of the people that watch council as usually middle-aged ratepayers who...
Journos.
Yeah, and journos. And that's not the case. There's lots of different people. I know I often see, I suppose, a mum and, her son who it seems like it's just a calming activity that they come in, like it's a routine. It's nice. And I like the routine. So I'm like, yeah, I get you. But, this teenage son who, it's not like, it's this very moment where it's like, it is just, people do just come and watch because you can and because it's a routine, because it affects them, but also because it feels very kind of systematic and nice. So, I guess there is that kind of, I don't know.
Well, I think we'll leave it there. It was, a real pleasure to be able to talk to you. And we'd love to see you at Brisbane City Council. Come along.
And Tight Knit, follow Tight Knit. It's on Instagram. So if you're not following.
Yeah, follow us on Insta.
Every week. It's so much fun. Thank you so much.
Stay tight.